Last Friday, Sophie casually mentioned that she was hosting a small, laid-back gathering, just a few coworkers, nothing out of the ordinary. She spoke so nonchalantly, making it seem like it was no big deal. In fact, she practically urged me to spend the night at my friend Jake's place. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right. It wasn't anything obvious, just a nagging unease deep in my gut. That feeling stayed with me throughout the evening, so I decided to cut my night short and head home earlier than planned. I told myself I was just dropping by to grab something, maybe see how her little get-together was going. But as I turned onto our street, my stomach sank. The entire block was lined with cars, far too many for just a quiet gathering of friends. Stepping inside, the first thing that hit me was the music. It wasn't soft background noise meant for casual conversation. It was loud, pulsing, the kind of music you'd expect at a wild party. As I pushed open the door, the scene in front of me was nothing like what Sophie had described. The house was packed with people I didn't recognize, drinks in hand, talking, laughing, filling every space. This was no small gathering, it was a full-blown party. Then I saw her. Near the kitchen, standing close to some guy I had never seen before. He was tall, athletic, and far too comfortable in her space, his hand resting lightly on her back. She was laughing at something he said, completely absorbed in the moment, not even noticing me at first. But the way she leaned toward him, the way her body responded to his presence, it sent a sharp, twisting feeling through my gut. This wasn't right. She had told me it would be just a quiet night with friends, but standing there, looking at her with this stranger, I knew how wrong I had been. I froze for a moment, taking everything in. Sophie still hadn't noticed me, she was too caught up in whatever she was feeling in that moment, practically attached to this guy. My mind scrambled to process what I was seeing, the way she tilted her head toward him, the easy way he kept his hand on her, like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was an intimacy I had never seen her share with a so-called friend. A tightness built in my chest, constricting my breath. Was I reading too much into this? Imagining things? I wasn't the jealous type, but this was different. Something was off, and I wasn't going to just stand there and pretend it wasn't happening. I started making my way through the crowd, weaving past strangers who had taken over our home. As I approached, she finally spotted me. For the briefest second, her eyes widened and the smile on her face faltered. But then, just as quickly, she recovered. A bright, overly casual grin replaced the momentary panic. "Oh, you're back early," she said, stepping away from the guy just a little too fast, her tone light and breezy, like nothing was wrong. But I caught that flicker of worry in her eyes before she masked it. The guy, whoever he was, didn't even flinch. He just stood there, smirking slightly, completely unfazed by my sudden arrival. It was like he knew something I didn't. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice tight, my eyes locked on Sophie. "Thought I'd check out this quiet gathering you were talking about." Her smile wavered for a split second before she forced it back into place. "Oh, you know how it is," she said, a little too brightly. "People from work brought a few friends. It wasn't supposed to get this big." I shifted my focus to the guy beside her, my blood simmering. "And this is?" Sophie hesitated, just for a beat. "Oh, this is Ryan," she finally said. "He's a friend from work." A friend from work. That's what she was calling it. But everything I had just witnessed told a different story. I studied them both carefully. Ryan didn't seem the least bit nervous. If anything, he looked comfortable, too comfortable. Like he belonged here, in my home, standing this close to my wife. The unease in my stomach only deepened. "A friend from work," I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue with a sharp edge. My gaze shifted to Ryan, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You seem pretty comfortable for a work friend." Ryan simply raised an eyebrow, unfazed. He took a sip of his drink, smirking slightly. "We all get along well at the office," he said, his tone easy, like none of this was unusual. Sophie shifted uncomfortably beside him, shooting him a quick glance, as if silently begging him to stop talking. But it was too late. My mind was already piecing things together. I noticed how she instinctively stepped slightly in front of him, almost like she was trying to put a barrier between us. "Yeah," I said, my voice low, steady. "Seems like you've been getting along really well." Her expression tensed. "Ethan, stop. You're being ridiculous. It's just a party, okay? Nothing's going on." She let out a forced laugh, but it rang hollow. I stepped in closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "If nothing's going on, why do you look so nervous?" For the first time, her confident front cracked. She blinked, caught off guard, biting her lip as she glanced away. It was subtle, but I could feel it, the truth hovering just beneath the surface, threatening to break free. Then it happened. She glanced at Ryan, just for a second. But that second was enough. The way their eyes met wasn't casual, nor was it the kind of glance shared between friends. It carried something far deeper, something I hadn't seen between us in what felt like an eternity. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just paranoia or insecurity playing tricks on me. Something was happening, something real. Sophie must have noticed the shift in my expression, the way the realization settled into my features. Her posture changed instantly, turning defensive like someone who knew they were caught with nowhere to run. She parted her lips, no doubt ready to unleash a flood of excuses, but I wasn't going to make this easy for her. How long, Sophie? My voice was sharp, cutting through the thick tension in the air. Her eyes widened for a brief moment, the flicker of panic unmistakable. But I was past the point of patience. How long has this been going on? Ryan remained silent. The smug grin he had been wearing moments ago vanished, but he didn't move. He just stood there, watching, as if he was waiting for her to handle this, to lie, most likely. The weight of their unspoken connection was suffocating, pressing against me like an unbearable force. I don't know what you're talking about. Her voice wavered, the uncertainty in it betraying her words. You're overreacting. Seriously, Ethan, there's nothing. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off before she could dig herself deeper. My voice rose, raw with frustration. I saw the way you looked at him. Don't stand there and tell me it's nothing. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. Instead, her gaze flickered toward Ryan, and that's when I saw it, undeniable guilt. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was real. I took a step forward, my eyes locked onto hers. How long? I demanded, my fists clenching at my sides. Do you think I'm blind? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? Sophie's face drained of color. The forced casualness she had clung to was gone now, replaced by something raw, panic, maybe even shame. For the first time that night, she didn't have a quick response. There was no easy escape. A deep heat burned in my chest, anger twisting with betrayal until they were inseparable. You promised me, I hissed, my voice unsteady. You told me this was just a small gathering. But this? This isn't about a party, is it? How long have you been lying to me? She swallowed hard, her eyes darting between me and Ryan like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist. But she had nowhere to go. Not anymore. Finally, she let out a slow, unsteady breath, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. A few months. The words slammed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. Months? I echoed, disbelief washing over me. You've been doing this for months? She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence between us was answer enough. The walls seemed to close in, the air around me growing thick and suffocating. The noise from the party, the distant sounds of laughter and music, became nothing more than a muffled backdrop to this nightmare. The weight of her confession crushed down on me. I turned to Ryan, who had been silently observing everything unfold, his expression disturbingly calm, as if none of this truly mattered. My patience snapped. You knew she was married? My voice was low, cold, filled with an anger I could barely contain. You knew about me and you didn't care? Ryan shrugged, his response unbearably casual. Look, man, it's not that serious. Sophie and I were just having some fun, that's all. That word fun set something off inside me. My blood boiled at the sheer disrespect, at the way he dismissed everything like it was nothing. To them, this was just entertainment. A fleeting thrill. But to me, this was my marriage. My life. I turned back to Sophie, my voice shaking with fury. This? I gestured between them. This is what you threw everything away for? A few months of fun? You betrayed me for this? She flinched, but the guilt wasn't immediate. She was still clinging to her defenses, still trying to salvage what was left. Ethan, I never meant for it to go this far, she stammered, her voice laced with desperation. It wasn't supposed to be serious. I didn't want to hurt you. But it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no undoing it. Her words, her feeble attempts to justify what she had done, only fueled the fire burning inside me. She hadn't just broken my trust, she had destroyed it, shattered it into pieces. And now, standing before me, she couldn't even fully own up to it. Not serious? I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. You spent months lying to me, sneaking around, and you expect me to believe this wasn't serious? I could hardly contain the anger surging through me. You acted like everything was fine, like nothing was happening, and now you expect me to just move on? To pretend this never happened? Her face tensed, and for a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt? Regret? Fear? But just as quickly, it was replaced by frustration. Ethan, I didn't want it to happen like this, she said, almost pleading. But you've been so distant, so wrapped up in your own world. I felt invisible. A sharp wave of nausea rolled over me. Even now, she was trying to twist the narrative, to shift the blame onto me as if her betrayal was somehow my fault. So that's your excuse? I shot back, my voice laced with disbelief. You felt neglected, and instead of talking to me, you turned to him? That's what you're saying. She had no answer. And that silence said more than words ever could. The silence between us felt suffocating, thick with all the words left unspoken. I cast another glance at Ryan, still standing there, still smug. But he wasn't the real issue here. The real betrayal came from her. Sophie had allowed this to happen. She had made a choice, a conscious decision to lie, to break my trust, and now she stood before me trying to justify it as if it had been unavoidable. You know what, Sophie? My voice was cold, stripped of any remaining patience. I don't care about your excuses anymore. You made your decision. You didn't just betray me, you shattered everything we built. For a fleeting moment, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe realization. But it was too late. The damage was already done. Her expression hardened at my words, yet I could see the cracks forming in her composure. For a brief second, it seemed like she might crumble under the weight of her choices, that the reality of what she had done was finally sinking in. But instead, she folded her arms across her chest, her voice sharpening with defiance. Oh, so you think this is all on me? That I'm the only one to blame? Her sudden defensiveness caught me off guard. I had expected remorse, maybe even an apology. But this? She was still trying to shift the blame, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Oh, you're absolutely right, I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. I'm the one who let some random guy put his hands all over me in our house at our party. That was definitely my doing. She glared at me, frustration burning in her eyes. Do you think I wanted it to come to this? Do you even hear yourself? We've been falling apart for years, Ethan. I tried to talk to you, to make you see how distant you've been. But you didn't care. I was lonely. Lonely. That single word hit like a blade, twisting deeper into an already open wound. But I wasn't going to let her play the victim. Not after this. Lonely. My voice was tight with anger. And Ryan was your solution? You didn't even try to fix anything. Instead, you went behind my back. If you were so miserable, you could have left. But you didn't. You chose this. That's on you, Sophie, not me. Ryan had gone silent, his arrogance replaced with something else, discomfort, maybe guilt. But he was no longer relevant. This was between me and her. I never wanted to hurt you, she murmured, her voice trembling, though the sincerity in it felt weak. But I was hurting too. You stopped caring a long time ago. Her words stung, but I refused to let her twist this into something it wasn't. No, Sophie. You're not the victim here. You had a choice, and you made it. And now you're trying to justify it as if I pushed you into this. But that's not what happened. This is on you. For the first time, she didn't have a response. The weight of her actions seemed to finally settle on her shoulders. The defiance, the attempts to shift blame, they all faded as she stared at the floor. Her arms dropped to her sides, her posture no longer defensive but lost, as if she had no idea what to say next. And honestly, neither did I. But the anger still burned within me. It wasn't enough for her to simply stand there looking regretful now that everything was out in the open. I needed her to truly understand what she had done, to face the destruction she had caused. You really don't get it, do you? I broke the silence, my voice low, unsteady with the weight of everything I hadn't said. You didn't just cheat, Sophie. You broke me. You made me question everything, every word, every moment, every memory. And now you're standing here, acting as if it was inevitable, as if I drove you to this. She lifted her gaze then, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it regret? Guilt? Fear? I wasn't sure if it was the fear of losing me or the fear of facing the consequences. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered. I never planned for any of this. I was just lost. And Ryan, he was there. I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. He was there. That's all it took? Some guy showed up and gave you attention, and suddenly none of it mattered. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came. She knew the excuses were empty now. The lies had run their course. And for the first time that night, it seemed like she truly grasped the depth of what she had done. But it was too late. The finality of it all crashed over me like a wave. I took a step back. I'm done, I said, quieter now but firm. You can keep your excuses, your guilt, whatever. I'm done with this. I turned to leave, and this time she didn't try to stop me. But just as I reached the door, something in her shifted. For the first time that night, she stepped forward, her voice breaking through the thick silence. Ethan, wait, she called out, her tone raw, desperate, cracking like the mask she had worn for so long. But there was nothing left to say. I hesitated at the door, not because I wanted to stay, but because some part of me still needed closure. I needed her to grasp the weight of this moment, to understand that this wasn't something she could undo with a few apologies and a remorseful expression. This wasn't something she could just talk her way out of. You don't get to do this, I said, my back still turned to her. You don't get to stand there after months of deception and suddenly act like it matters now that I'm walking away. You made your choice, Sophie. Now you have to live with it. Her voice cracked again, this time weaker, more desperate. I know. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can you. I turned around, cutting her off with just a look. Fix this. My voice was hollow, disbelieving. You actually think there's anything left to fix? I shook my head, a mix of sorrow and disbelief pressing against my chest. You destroyed everything. You took what we had and tossed it aside like it meant nothing. And now you want to fix it. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I had been shattered by her betrayal, torn apart by the lies, by the months of pretending everything was fine while she laughed and flirted with someone else. I had given her everything and she had crushed it underfoot. I don't know what you thought was going to happen, I continued, my voice steady and final. But this? Us? It's over. Her tears finally spilled over, but they didn't move me. It was too late for that. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, leaving Sophie, her tears, and the wreckage of what we had behind me. Stepping outside, the night air hit me like a slap. Each step away from that house felt like breaking free from quicksand, like I was finally escaping the suffocating weight I had been drowning under for months. The sound of the party faded behind me, disappearing along with the life I had once believed in. Yet, instead of relief, all I felt was emptiness. The anger, the betrayal, it had burned through me, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. In truth, I had lost Sophie long before tonight. Maybe, deep down, I had always known. But seeing it play out, hearing her excuses, watching her stand there with Ryan, it tore through me in ways I hadn't been prepared for. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly ahead. The future I had envisioned, the plans we had made, the promises we had shared, it was all gone. And now, in the hollow space left behind, I had no idea what came next. But then, as I looked out at the empty street, something else settled over me, an unexpected, quiet sense of clarity. Sophie had made her decision, and I had made mine. She had chosen deception, betrayal, and selfish indulgence. I had chosen to walk away. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was reclaiming control over my own life. I inhaled deeply and started the engine, the low hum filling the silence. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. It would take time to heal, time to rebuild, but one thing was certain, I deserved better. And from this moment on, I wouldn't settle for anything less.